In this Knife Talk video, we're looking at the Spyderco Ouroboros. And this is a Paul Alexander design. It's Paul Alexander's first collaboration with Spyderco. He's done a couple other Spyderco collaborations since this one, like the Sliver Axe and the upcoming Parada. But this was the first one, and when I first saw it, I really liked the design. First of all, I thought that it was cool. I have been interested in the symbolism of the Ouroboros symbol for a long time. So what it is it's basically a snake eating its own tail, and it's something that you can see in a lot of different cultures and throughout history. You can see it in some Egyptian, I believe some Native American, and then kind of the more famous are it's used in alchemy, and then also as Hormundigar, the world-eating or world-encircling serpent in Norse mythology. So kind of a cool name, and somehow I think that Paul Alexander was able to make the knife design fitting for that name, and I'm not exactly sure that I can explain how, but I think it's the curve of the spine along with the curve of the back of the handle kind of makes for a very, kind of unbroken circle there, or oval, and it just kind of looks like a snake head, I think, a little bit, but that might just be in my head that it accomplishes looking like its name. Either way, it's a very interesting and cool looking design. So you can see that it has this really wide compared to the rest of the handle butt end of the handle, and that allows for it to have quite a tall blade. So it has lots of belly. You can see that it actually curves up here towards the plunge line and then goes back down and then up towards the tip, which makes for what a couple different good uses. I'll go into that later, but sticking with the overall look of the design, it's very unique. You don't really see knives with this design, and part of that is because it has the compression lock. So I think that it would be very, very difficult to accomplish this kind of knife design with most any other lock, like especially a frame lock. I don't think that you could do this with a frame lock. Even a back lock, I think it would be very difficult. Maybe a plunge or button lock, but the compression lock, the Spyderco compression lock, definitely helps allow for this kind of design, very unique, different design. So one thing with the design that I wasn't real sure about was this area right here towards the butt. I wasn't sure that would feel good in the hand. Now one thing, I think anytime that a handle comes down to a rounded point like this, that actually usually helps the ergonomics rather than coming to like a, like an upturn or a ridge. But once I got it, it actually turned out to feel really good in hand. It kind of fills the last three fingers and then gives you almost kind of a guard or a choil here in the main grip. So really solid grip here. You could really, put a lot of power behind it and everything like that. And I have, I've used this knife quite a bit. And then in the forward grip here, you can get a really good either choil or pinch grip. And I'll talk about that for the use of this knife a little later here. But it actually turned out to be very, very ergonomic. I think that Paul Alexander did a great job designing this handle, both for the looks and for the ergonomics. One thing that does help the ergonomics is that it has a small wire clip. So this offers a little bit deeper carry. I mean, it's not super deep because you'll have that much up above your pocket. Not a big deal to me at all. But it's a very low profile clip so that you don't feel it much in your hand when you're gripping the knife. And also, you don't see it too much in your pocket while you're carrying it. So that's nice. Moving on to the compression lock. The compression lock is a really interesting lock. So if you're not familiar with it, basically, unlike a liner lock, it's not in the front. So in a liner lock, it would be up here in the front. This is in the back, and what it does, it's going to be hard to see in there, but this tab is like a liner lock. So to unlock it, you move it over, the blade blocks it, and then you see that area right there looks a lot like a liner lock, except it's on a different plane. So as you open it, that tab is going to go across that face and lock against that face, but at the same time, it's locking against this stop pin. So the compression lock tab goes against the face of the tang of the knife and against the stop pin, and at the same time the back of the tang of the knife is going against the stop pin also. So it makes for a really strong lock that's also really easy to use. And one of the big things that's nice about this lock is that when you use it, you don't have to put your fingers in the way of the blade. So you just, you know, unlock it and it goes down. So I actually have come to like the compression lock because of this knife. I've had a couple paramilitary 2s, and definitely, you know, I could see the advantage of the compression lock on it, but because I didn't really like the ergonomics of the paramilitary 2, I just didn't really use them that much. So, you know, this is my first compression lock that I've used quite a bit. That Spyderco is using the compression lock a lot. They have a lot of knives coming out in it, like the Amalgam and I can't think of it, the Mantra 3, the Caribbean knives that just came out. So lots of compression locks coming out. So if you'd like to check one out, you can definitely get one with their 2018 offerings. But moving on to one thing about this knife that some people, or actually I guess a lot of people, especially like people with a lot of reach, didn't like, is that it does have, I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but it does have nylon washers. So rather than phosphor bronze, which are, you know, generally considered to be better, it has nylon washers. Now, a lot of high-end knives have nylon washers, and I think that it's because in reality, some knife makers, you know, don't expect or don't want their end users or consumers to take apart the knives, or even to really care about what kind of washers it has, as long as it works well. And the truth is that I'm not 100% sure how much better phosphor bronze washers are than nylon washers for performance. Maybe slightly, and I have to be honest that I do wish that this had phosphor bronze washers in the pivot. I think that intuitively they seem like they would be more durable, being that they're made of a metal rather than a plastic. But I don't know if that, you know, holds true in, you know, reality or in materials testing. The other thing is that some people who got this knife thought that it was less smooth because of that. Now, I personally think that they were comparing it to a paramilitary 2, which has the step pivot. The step pivot means that you can tighten it, and it's not going to be tightening against the blade because of how the pivot's created. So you can tighten it till there's no play at all, and it will still basically not have it'll have very little friction on the blade, which makes the paramilitary 2 often a very, very smooth knife, and a very easy closing knife. So I think that that's not really a fair comparison because this doesn't have a step pivot. Now that said, kind of moving into the price of this knife, I do think that the materials of this knife don't match the price of this knife. So this knife is about, I think, $185. Maybe with the increase of Spyderco's pricing, it's more like $190. But at $180, so this has, I think it's over here, yeah, VG10, no, that says Seki City. Yep, there it goes. VG10 steel, which I like VG10 steel. A lot of people, I guess now, like think S30V is a boring steel, and you know, I mean, I don't. I definitely don't think that VG10 is not a good steel, and I'm happy to use knives that have VG10. I find that it takes a really, really nice edge and holds an edge reasonably well. But I'd say VG10, I'd be looking for it on a less expensive knife. For $185, I think that, you know, probably at least S30V. $180, I'd be looking for either S35 or, to be honest, even something like, you know, the more widespread or more easily sourced high-end steels like M390 or CTS 204P, things like that, or CPM 20CV. things that are you know, easy to get, not things like M4 or K390, but are higher end, because you know, at $185, it's not a cheap knife. The other thing, again, like I said, and I'll talk about how these nylon washers do work well later, but I do think that at $185, it just makes more sense to make the customers happy and make it seem like a high quality knife that doesn't use, you know, too much plastic. Which, you know, people always see metal as higher end than plastic, and I think rightly so. It would have been better to use phosphor bronze washers in there. Even, to be honest, to get, I mean, usually they don't put ball bearing washers or pivots in non-flipper knives, but, you know, I would like to have seen at least phosphor bronze washers. No problem with the G10. This is actually some of the nicer G10 that I've gotten from Spyderco. It has a good amount of texture to it. A lot nicer than the Police 4 that I got recently. The Police 4 was a little bit slippery. This has lots of texture. The build of this knife, getting to something that was really nice about it, was really, really nice. So it is pretty much perfectly centered, as you can see, and it's been that way the whole time I've had it. It opens really, really smoothly. It locks up perfectly, no play in any direction. And one thing here, after it broke in, you know, when I first got it, it wasn't this smooth. But once, you know, I'd had this knife for a while. I got this for my birthday, so I've had it for a couple months now. It's really smooth. So you can see that I gave it a little bit of wrist action there, but often it will drop on its own. I don't know if it's going to do it on camera here, but you can see that even with that wrist action, it's really easy to open. You can open it with the compression lock and close it. So I really have no problem with the action on this knife. I think that again, I would have rather seen phosphor bronze washers, and you know, if it was an easy fix, I probably would put phosphor bronze washers in it. But as it stands, it's super quick to open. You can see that it Spidey flicks like really, really well, and it's really easy to close too. Real smooth, easy to close one-handed. I've never had a problem with it, you know, not closing, and right now it's not, but I've been using it a lot. But a lot of the times, especially, you know, after I put some mineral oil in the pivot, it will close, you know, by its own weight. I want to see if it'll do it once. Maybe not. Anyway, you can see that it's really smooth. So, you know, it is a really well-made knife. I haven't taken it apart or anything because I haven't needed to. It's really smooth. It works really well. Finally, going to the blade shape here, I think sometimes a lot of people see this blade shape and they, you know, aren't sure what you'd do for it. I, on the other hand, think that this is a really, really great blade shape for a few reasons. One, it has enough point that you can use it for piercing tasks. So you can, you know, I actually, I'm pretty sure it was this knife that I used. I drilled an extra hole in my belt the other day. I didn't realize I had picked an old belt that was a little bit too big, and I used this to drill an extra hole in the belt just the other day. So it can work for piercing tasks. It definitely can work for normal, like, everyday carry type stuff, like opening boxes and letters. There's no reason a blade shape like this wouldn't. At the tip, so right here, it's pretty much just like a spear point, or, you know, similar to the Mannix or something like that with a little bit more belly. Because of that more belly, you can do kind of like push cuts a little bit better because it has this more of a belly right there. So it works for that well. And then finally, because of, or not finally, actually, there's one more thing I'm going to talk about here, but because of this nice curve, so it's actually up curved a little bit and then goes down and then has a really big belly, you can do rocking cuts pretty well. So I've used this quite a bit for, you know, like light food prep, just getting my lunch ready and things like that, and it works really well. And then finally, something that I haven't used this knife for, but I think that it would be really good for, is skinning. So I think that this would be a really nice hunting knife. I think that you could skin animals really well, anything from, you know, a squirrel to, you know, I think even a moose you could probably skin with this. I haven't used a compression lock knife skinning something. I'm not even sure that I've used a locking knife. I've used a lot of slip joints to skin things, but I'm not sure I've used a locking knife. I usually use a fixed blade or a slip joint. But I really think that this would work well for that. And finally, to talk about one last thing with this knife, This was a gift from my fiance for my most recent birthday, and I was really blown away by it and happy because this was a knife that for a long time it was really the only one I think I was talking about to her. I'd talk about it, and the reason for that was because you know, I didn't really want to spend $185 on a knife, or on one knife, on a production knife. And I really liked the design, but I was kind of on the fence, but I knew that I wanted it. And I think she, you know, it's always nice to realize that somebody's listening to all the stuff that you're saying. And I think she realized that I really wanted this knife, and got it for me. And I was really blown away because she's not a knife person. She certainly puts up with and actually has learned a lot about knives through my interest in knives. But you know, I just showed that she was really paying attention to what I was talking about with the knives and stuff. So I really appreciated that, and for that reason, this is a knife that I enjoy, not only because it's a cool design and a useful design, but because it's a really, you know, it means a lot to me. So I carry this one a lot, I use it a lot, and I think that it's a really nice knife. It's a little bit more expensive than the materials would suggest, I think, but I think part of that is because it was Paul Alexander's first collaboration. Part of it, I think, is because of the unique design. But if you are able to get one of these, I think that you'll enjoy it. I think that you'll find that it's a lot more utilitarian and useful than you expect. And one reason for that here that I forgot to mention is that it's a really nice size. The blade is about 2 3/4 inches with right about 2 3/4 inches of edge. So it's a good size. It's not quite small enough it's under 3 inches, so it's legal most places. So you can take it most places where you can have a locking knife, and you know, it's going to be pretty much all you need for most of your cutting tasks. So really, you know, has a lot of sentimental value to me, but also a great knife. And I think that if you can find one for a price that you think is reasonable for it, it's definitely going to be one that you're going to enjoy having, because it is so unique, and because at the same time you can, you know, really put it to use. So I really like my Spyderco Ouroboros. I'm really happy and thankful that Casey gave this to me, and I'm looking forward to Spyderco's other Paul Alexander designs. I would like to get a sliver axe. I think that it's a really cool looking knife, especially with the compression lock flipper, and the Parata, the most recent upcoming Paul Alexander design, has a new, I think they're calling it the stop lock, but a new lock that's both ambidextrous, which the compression lock's not really ambidextrous. You can do it with your left hand, but it's a little bit more awkward. But it's ambidextrous, and it's up on the back, so you don't have to put your fingers in the way of the blade. So that's my thoughts on the Spyderco Ouroboros. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, and if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to comment them below. I do my best to answer all of those, and I am interested in what everybody has to say. I have lots of other videos. I have over 100 other videos, so if you're interested in traditional knives especially, I have a lot of videos on those, and then lots of Spyderco knives and some other knife companies. So check those out, and if you'd like to get notifications when I post new videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and otherwise, I hope you don't forget to go out and do good.